with a YA book review for you of Renegades by Marissa Meyer. And this is a beast of a book. It comes in at 552 pages, which if you've read the Lunar Chronicles, you know that each book is a little bit longer, more or less, than the previous book. So we know Marissa Meyer can write chunky books. And Heartless was kind of, I think, average. I think it was like 400 maybe or something. So Renegades is a duology, and it is a story of superheroes and supervillains. And I'm actually part of, even as I record this, a read-along for this book, but I went ahead and just read through and finished it so I could read other things. And we're actually sorted into anarchists and renegades, and I'm on the anarchist team and one of my good friends is on the renegades team. But anyway, so this follows Nova, who it opens in a really traumatic experience that she has when she's 6. And essentially people with superpowers are called prodigies, whether they're villains or renegades. Just if you have abilities, you're considered a prodigy. And what ends up happening is, prior to the story, prodigies are targeted because people who don't have powers are afraid of them. And so, excuse me, what ends up happening is there becomes something known as the Age of Anarchy, and there's all these like gangs that are creating problems for regular people and non-regular people. And so a lot of people with powers are kind of in hiding, but then the Age of Anarchy is kind of when the villains kind of take over under the leadership of a man named Ace Anarchy, who is Nova's uncle. And he, you know, things kind of get out of control, whereas Nova grows up believing that he just wants everyone kind of to be treated the same, prodigy or non-prodigy. And what ends up happening is the renegades kill her uncle, and the renegades become in charge. So the superheroes become in charge, and they form a council. And so like the old school superheroes are the council, and then the renegades are kind of the younger generation that they do everything. Like they're law enforcement, and they're just, in Nova's eyes, they kind of establish this learned helplessness in the people, and they don't like think or want to do anything for themselves. And to her, that's the ultimate problem. And she thought, or thinks, or not clear which way really, that her uncle was trying to eliminate that kind of learned helplessness. So the story alternates in third person between Nova and Adrian, and it's not like every other chapter. I think it's kind of random, like it's chunks, and then sometimes it's every other chapter. And Adrian is adopted by 2 council members, Captain Chromium, and I don't remember what Simon does. I just remember that he can be invisible. There's like a chart in the front for the most frequent mentioned renegades, anarchists, and council members, so you know their abilities and their real names. And it's in the front of the book, which I guess some people miss that, so make sure you check that out. But Adrian is named Sketch, and he essentially can draw things into reality. And he has an alter ego called the Sentinel, and essentially he realized that he can draw himself more powers. And so Nova's alter ego is called Nightmare, and they have an altercation very early on, like chapter 2 or something, and that's when she first meets the Sentinel. She already knew kind of about Sketch and his team, but she says something to him like, those with no fear cannot be brave, or something like that. And that reminds him of something that was found. His mother was a superhero who was killed, and there was a card on her with that saying on it, and she could fly, but she had fallen from like a building, so it was really mysterious how she died, and kind of, I don't know if it was brushed under the rug or what, it's never really totally made clear. So then what ends up happening is Adrian becomes obsessed with this Nightmare and trying to find her, to thinking that he can get answers from her. So what ends up happening then is, long story short, the anarchists have been in hiding, and they're kind of pushed into like a dire situation where they don't do anything and they kind of live in hiding. And how this altercation happened was Nightmare put a hit on Captain Chromium, but she missed, and then there was just like chaos. So then Adrian becomes even more obsessed because she tried to kill his stepdad, but then she said this thing that connects to his mother, so he's wants answers, so he's like on this mission to find her. So what ends up happening is the anarchists decide that Nova should try out at the trials, which is how they recruit new renegades. And she tries out to infiltrate the renegades, and she ends up getting accepted, and then her new alias becomes insomnia, because her superpower is she can put people to sleep, but it's through intention and skin-to-skin contact, but she can also just not sleep. And this is a result of what happened to her when she was 6. And that's often how the superpowers happen, is through, sometimes they're just like born, like everyone is born with them who has them, but they're kind of laid dormant sometimes until something triggers it. So essentially she gets recruited and she begins to infiltrate. And so basically we have Adrian and Nova both living these double lives. Nobody knows that he's Sentinel until much later one person finds out, and that person, it doesn't matter that they found out. And then Nova is living as Nightmare and Insomnia, so really she has like a triple alias, and things kind of go from there. So Nightmare / Insomnia / Nova is trying to take down the Renegades, but she's kind of running into this block of like, not all the bad people are good and not all the good people are bad, you know, and like they're the blurred lines between good and evil essentially. And Adrian kind of has that a little bit. His more storyline is obviously between Nova and him as Adrian, there starts to be an attraction, and they're like, he's kind of getting into it, but she's kind of fighting it, but like it goes against how she's actually feeling, like she doesn't really want to fight it. So there's that dichotomy. But really, that's the gist without trying to give any spoilers away. I actually ended up spoiling myself. My friend did too. Because I was looking at the last page to find how many pages there were, and I saw a name and I totally spoiled myself. Even so, this is a really long book, and it's kind of a beast, and the pacing is a little bit off, I feel like. My friend put it best, because since we're doing the read-along, her and I actually ended up reading this almost the exact same length. She finished a little bit before me. It took me about 9 days to read this, and I don't know, the pacing is just a little bit off. She said it best, because she said it just feels like a really long introduction, and then by the end, I just kind of wanted to be done with it, but it's a huge cliffhanger at the end, and virtually no plot points are resolved in this book. Like, every single thing is open, and I don't really know how I feel like about that. I feel like it's kind of not a good strategy. Usually a book, yes, a book can have a cliffhanger, but I feel like when you're writing a series or a duology or a trilogy, that there are overarching plot points that carry on into the other books, maybe like 1 or 2, you know, leading up to the big altercation or climax or whatever. But then within each book, there should be smaller problems, and those plot points should close. So pretty much everything is open-ended at the end of this book, and I found that not satisfying. I had another friend who, her feelings were that the book was boring. I don't necessarily think for me it was boring. It just seemed like some parts dragged a little bit and were unnecessary. Like, there are several chapters of just surveillance, and I get that the underlying meaning of that was for the new team to get to know each other. But I don't know, you know, like, it started out kind of like a 4-star read to me, and it really reads like a movie. I don't know if it was written and the rights already bought to be a movie, but it really plays out like that, even with some of the corny, like, comic-y book kind of stuff. But it just, by the end, Nova's like going against her intuition kind of started to grate on my nerves a little bit. And there's a really great character in here named Max, whose nickname or alias is the Bandit, and he is a super amazing character. I just didn't like that after 552 pages, nothing was resolved. Like, nothing. And within the last 40 pages, besides the thing that spoiled myself, that was a new plot point, and there was another plot point introduced within the last 4 pages. So not only was nothing resolved, but 2 new plot points were introduced in the last 40 pages of 552 pages. I don't know how I feel about that. I'm definitely going to read the second book because I want to know what happens. And it's enjoyable. So for me, it kind of teetered down to like a 3.5, 3.75 star rating. And I don't know, I think it's really just the pacing and the length, and that no plot points were resolved. I know some people, my friend had issues with feeling that characters were underdeveloped, and I could see that because there's a lot of characters to keep track of in here, because there's different renegade teams, and then the anarchists, and then anarchists who passed away, and then renegades who passed away, and then the older renegades, and all that kind of stuff. So the thing in the beginning does help to keep that straight, but when you have a lot of characters, you do run the risk of sometimes not having them be fully developed. Overall, it's an enjoyable read. I am not into really like comics and superhero. I am currently reading The Warbringer by Leigh Bardugo, because I love Leigh Bardugo, and that's kind of off to a slow start, but I also got the Batman book to try out Marie Lu, because I've never read any books by her. So I'm really, like, I'm trying to get into it, and this is kind of a cool spin on it. It just, I don't know, and I didn't go in expecting it to be like the Lunar Chronicles, because I've read Heartless by her, and Heartless was completely different too, which I loved Heartless personally, even though the ending was super sad, but I think it's just a really long first book at 552 pages, and I have a feeling that the next book is either going to be as long or longer, so I don't know. I mean, I know you can't make one 1,000 page book typically for YA, but it just seemed like I wish a few more plot points would have been resolved going from this book and into the next book. And the next book doesn't come out until November 2018, so this one came out November 2017, so a year from this release. So yeah, I mean, if you like superheroes and you like Marissa Meyer, you're probably going to like this. If you don't like cliffhangers, I would wait till the second book comes out. If you don't like books with lots of unresolved points at the end that don't get resolved until the next book, then I would suggest you wait until that one comes out. Otherwise, it was a pretty enjoyable read and a little bit different than what we usually expect from Marissa Meyer. In the meanwhile, happy reading and happy